Blowing snowflakes flicker as the lines of a mountain range appear in a black and white animated sequence. As snow builds up on the mountain peaks, a white bird lands in the foreground. Text, SAX, the Aleut word for bird. Water rises at the base of the mountains as the bird flies away. A fish jumps out of the water. Text, QAX, the Aleut word for fish. A man rowing a boat appears.
The Anunnaki people of the Alaska Peninsula have described the creatures they live with for thousands of years.
An otter holding a pup drifts across the water. Text, CHNGATUX, the Aleut word for sea otter. A seal holds its head above the surface. Text, ISUX, the Aleut word for harbor seal. The seal dives down toward the ocean floor. Black sandbars protrude from the waters of the bay.
Today, languages are diverse, but the people and creatures remain, living in and around the Izembek National Wildlife Refuge, a protected area on the traditional territories of the Anunnaki people.
A flock of birds flies low over grassy wetlands in the foreground of a mountain range covered with snow. Sunlight reflects on a patch of fog lingering over a mountain ridge.
The abundance of life spans across a beautiful and rich landscape.
Lakes among a mountain tundra. A steep snow-covered ridge.
The refuge sits along a string of dormant and active volcanoes.
Steam rises from a crater in a peak.
Some towering thousands of feet above the sea.
A stream widens through a grassy valley.
At their base, tundra valleys, crisscrossed by a never-ending flow of streams, are where some of Alaska's most iconic creatures thrive.
A fish darts away from a grizzly bear in one of the streams.
And Izembek's vast lagoon, a massive source of nutrients, is critical to both year-round residents and some of the planet's great long-distance travelers.
Birds swarm over water. A bear strolls through a field of wildflowers.
Although the smallest national wildlife refuge in Alaska, it's home to an abundance of biodiversity that's unique, even in this wild corner of the world.
A wolf stalks. Rays of sunlight pierce thick gray clouds behind a flock of birds migrating over wetlands. Text, Izembek National Wildlife Refuge, where life abounds. A satellite view of an area encompassing Cold Bay and King Cove in Alaska.
Located at the western tip of the Alaska Peninsula, the Izembek National Wildlife Refuge spreads across 310,000 acres of diverse lands.
Borders are highlighted.
Established in 1960, its eastern border follows the ridgeline along a semicircle of mountains. From there, the refuge extends west to encompass the 150-square-mile Izembek Lagoon, rolling tundra, and wind-swept coastline.
A yellow overlay fills the refuge.
In 1972, the state of Alaska created Izembek State Game Refuge to encompass the National Refuge and beyond. The area is managed by both the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Alaska Department of Fish and Game.
Two mountain peaks tower behind the calm waters of the lake.
It's August, and the refuge basks in long Alaskan summer days.
A river in a grassy valley.
The lagoon teems with life.
A breeze blows through the brown feathers of an eagle as it scans the landscape. Otters swim across a river with their heads above the surface.
River otters are often found in groups.
River otter pups perch on a rock protruding from the water.
Families are made up of a female and her pups, with or without an adult male.
The otters slide into the water, leaving one behind on the rock. It looks around and sits. Swans clean themselves in shallow water.
Izembek is home to the world's only population of non-migrating tundra swans, eating a variety of underwater plants and small arthropods.
A seal swims.
Nearby, curious harbor seals patrol the water.
The seal looks around as it paddles.
Other, bigger sea mammals have arrived at the lagoon.
The seal dives underwater. Dozens of walrus huddle on a rounded black sandbank extending out into the water. A plump walrus with lumpy brown skin and long tusks slowly makes its way to shore.
Growing up to 12 feet long and weighing nearly 2 tons, a giant male walrus pulls itself out of the water to haul out on a sandbank.
The walrus straightens and tilts his head. On the beach, several walrus sit up as others rest on their backs.
Pacific walrus are the largest marine mammals with flippers in Alaska.
The walrus lying on their backs hold up their flippers.
They gather in large herds.
A walrus nudges another.
Both males and females grow long, distinctive tusks.
A walrus lays down its head. Another walrus sniffs.
They also both sport the highly sensitive whiskers that they use to search the seafloor for their food.
A walrus lays down on its belly. Another walrus scratches its belly.
But bulls stand out by their bigger size and the many large bumps on their neck and shoulders called bosses.
A walrus flops onto its back. A walrus jerks its head as it snarls. A walrus slowly hobbles up a beach.
Walrus haul out on land when they can't find sea ice to rest on. This herd could be here as late as November, when sea ice begins to form farther north.
A walrus lays its head down. Calm waters and small islands surround the sandbank. An eagle stands on a grassy hill overlooking a lagoon.
The lagoon's bounty sustains many creatures. Bald eagles seek out the fish here.
The eagle takes off.
They scan the water, looking for easy prey.
A pair of eagles glide in the sky.
Izembek is home to 4 of the 5 species of Pacific salmon.
A school of salmon in a creek.
And from July to September, they return to the refuge to spawn.
A salmon lurches forward. From above, rivers funnel from the lagoon.
Arriving from the Bering Sea and North Pacific, hundreds of thousands of salmon make their way up the rivers and streams into the Joshua Green River watershed.
The rivers flow through a valley into the mountains. Salmon fight a current as water passes over them in a rocky creek. A salmon thrashes its tail to glide over rocks in shallow water.
These chum salmon fight the currents to reproduce in the very same places they were born.
Flowing water pushes a salmon back along a grassy bank.
They bring a bounty of nutrients with them.
Salmon spawn. A dead salmon lays on the bank.
Once the journey is complete, their decaying bodies help fertilize the streams and surrounding land.
Salmon congregate along a creek bed.
But not all will be successful in their reproductive mission.
The salmon swim against a current and dart away. Bear paws stretch across the creek bed. A bear scans the water as it hunts.
For brown bears, feeding on the salmon is vital to their long-term survival.
The bear climbs over rocks. A salmon thrashes its tail. The bear sprints and reaches underwater. It picks up the salmon with its mouth. The salmon thrashes its entire body as the bear bites down, losing a dorsal fin as it drops.
A male brown bear in Izembek can grow to 1,500 pounds and needs to raise its fat stores for the long winter.
The bear picks up another salmon with its teeth and carries it up a hillside.
The refuge supports a large bear population, and during the salmon run, bear densities can reach as many as 6 per mile along some streams.
3 bears hunt in a bend in a narrow stream. A bear lurches onto its front paws. A salmon slips from its grasp and rushes away. The bear hops behind the salmon until it disappears underwater. The bear scans the creek and lunges. The salmon gets away again and swims off. A female and 2 cubs scour a bank.
This female still cares for and protects her twin cubs.
A cub strolls with a salmon hanging from its mouth. The other follows.
They'll depend on mom for 2 to 3 years.
The cubs disappear behind tall grass, then follow their mother through a field.
When they separate, female cubs tend to stay close to where they were raised, while male cubs leave the area.
A bear tears the skin off a dead otter laying in a river.
Bears have relatively small home ranges here. Habitat in the Joshua Green River watershed is ideal. A combination of abundant food and little human disturbance.
A bear sits in a field eating a salmon. From above, the deep blue water of the Izembek Lagoon.
But what makes Izembek unique in the world is the unparalleled habitat that it provides for the birds that seek refuge here.
A flock of birds migrates.
The close proximity of Izembek Lagoon, coastal wetlands, and Kinzerov Lagoon play an important role in the life of millions of birds.
Coastal satellite view.
Tides, ice, and sea conditions can vary dramatically between these areas. Birds can select the most beneficial habitat and resting sites available as conditions deteriorate or improve.
Various birds congregate around a sandbar.
In 1986, Izembek Refuge was recognized as critical to the health of international bird migrations and was the first wetland of international importance designated in the U.S.
Ridges and grass below the lagoon's surface visible from above.
Protected by a line of barrier islands, the lagoon contains one of the largest eelgrass beds in the world.
Long blades of green grass sway under crystal clear rippling water.
It's a long, lush, and nutritious water plant that forms vast underwater meadows. The size and health of these underwater grasslands are the basis of a far-reaching, dynamic ecosystem.
Underwater strands of grass.
Eelgrass creates the building blocks of a food chain that supports creatures in the water, land, and in the air.
Large patches of eelgrass surround the dark waters of deep areas of the lagoon. Waves lap. The sun shines on a fallen white feather covered in water droplets.
The lagoon is a key stopover for migrating birds.
A white bird with a long thin beak scurries across a beach. A flock of gray geese with white heads gather on a sandbank.
Long valued by Alaska natives for its subsistence importance, emperor geese migrate through here by the tens of thousands.
5 geese flap their wings as they glide above the surface of the water. Others search sand with their beaks.
They nest primarily in western Alaska and will winter here along the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, and the Aleutian Islands.
Specks of white glisten on the water's surface as hundreds of geese with brown and white bodies and black heads swim in the lagoon.
But of all the world's travelers, Izembek may be most important to the Pacific black brant.
Brants paddle their feet.
It's a smaller, darker relative of the Canada goose.
A flock flies over water. The brants in the water flap and fly away.
It's now October, and around 150,000 brant feed and rest here each fall. Virtually the entire population of the species.
A flock of brants take off and swarm the sky, flying in close proximity. The brants circle and land on another area of water.
They'll spend up to 8 weeks fueling up on the eelgrass, most preparing for a non-stop trip to wintering areas in Mexico and protected bays along the Pacific coast of the U.S.
Tail feathers stick up as geese plunge their heads underwater.
It's around a 3,300-mile flight, during which they lose more than 30% of their body weight.
Brants search the water. A flock takes off.
But an increasing portion of the population is now staying put at Izembek.
A line of black brants watch as others migrate.
Warmer Alaska winters are leading to more ice-free eelgrass lagoons. Scientists are monitoring what impacts this trend will have on the brant and their eelgrass habitat.
Geese pass through the sky in front of snow-capped mountains. The sun illuminates one side of a jagged mountain ridge blanketed with snow.
Like the other 15 national wildlife refuges in Alaska, Izembek maintains and protects intact ecosystems that have been around for millennia.
A river winds across a lush green valley.
The cycles of life remain.
A bear ambles over a hill.
By mid-November, brown bears move towards their upland dens. Most hibernate, while some may remain active all winter.
A bear searches the ground in a field of wildflowers. Wolves dart across a grassy field.
A pack of wolves sounds off across the tundra. They may be following the caribou, their favorite prey, into lower-lying areas.
A herd of caribou strolls. A wolf closes its eyes as it howls. The howling wolf looks out into the distance.
Winter is arriving, bringing its own beauty to the refuge.
The sun sets over grasslands, clouds overshadow a mountain peak.
As one year gives way to another, for the descendants of the Ononak and for visitors to the area, Izembek has again provided the essence to support life near and far.
Photos of visitors.
It remains a refuge, conserving and protecting land and wildlife, and also the traditions of the people here, both now and in the future.
Wispy clouds hang over the horizon as a flock of geese take off from the surface of the lagoon. Credits. Narrated by Kathleen McCoy. Photos provided by Ryan Haggerty, Lisa Hupp, Rebecca Fabry. Animation provided by Crazy Bridge Studios. Stock footage provided by Pond5. Music provided by Audio Network. Sound design and mix, Ott House Audio. Narration record, Frostline Studios. Additional bird sounds provided by Macaulay Library, Cornell Lab of Ornithology. Recorded by William W. H. Gunn, Brian McCaffrey, Garrett Vinn, Josep Del Hoyo, Andrew Spencer. Special thanks to Izembek National Wildlife Refuge staff, the Alaska region of the National Wildlife Refuge System, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Produced by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. Copyright 2019, Cornell University.